Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Ayza Omer. Now, the European Union leaders have approved the terms of the UK's exit at a summit on Sunday. Now, Prime Minister Theresa May has to persuade politicians in the UK Parliament to back the deal. But cabinet ministers admit that this will not be easy for her. So now I would like to introduce my guests here. We have Mr. ATHER KAZMI, journalist with over 20 years experience covering this UK politics. Welcome to the show. And we have political analyst Dr. ZAKIR. Let's start with you, Mr. KAZMI. How do you feel about this deal having been finalized and now Theresa May heading back to the UK to try and convince her MPs? Where do you think it'll go from here?
It's not going to be easy. Theresa May, she managed to secure a deal with European Union, but in her own party, because at the moment her government has got a working majority of only 13 members in parliament. And I spoke to a member of the ruling party last night, and I was told that there are more than 80 MPs from ruling party who are against this deal at the moment. But she's got 2 weeks. The vote in the parliament is on the 12th of December. So she's got almost 2 weeks to convince her colleagues. And at the moment, the what you call Labour Party, which is the main opposition party, is also against this deal. So it is not looking very likely that UK Parliament would approve this deal.
Dr. ZAKRIYA, what's your take on it? What do you think will happen if the members of parliament reject this?
I don't think they are going to reject it, but I think this Brexit would have a negative impact on overall European politics, especially in the migration issue, the issues of extremism and national integration. It will further weaken the credibility, legitimacy, and the political capacity of the European Union to implement the agenda of human rights and integration.
So, Mr. KAZMI, coming back to you, what are the biggest contention points that the members of parliament have had with Theresa May's dealings in ironing out an ideal Brexit deal? Could you highlight just the key points that they have been protesting against from day one?
There are quite a few points, to be honest. In the beginning, it was a freedom of movement. Then it was also about the trade agreement. Then another hot issue was a border of Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. At the moment, that border is intra-EU border, but after Brexit, it will become an international border. So there would be some sort some sort of international checks and balances, checks and custom checks and all that. So there's quite a few things at that border. Then there was another issue of Gibraltar. Then there was another issue of fisheries, who would be allowed to fish in UK waters, and would UK fishermen would be allowed to fish in European waters. So there's quite a few things which people were not happy about. And another thing, people are not clear about many things. And some people, there's a certain feeling in the parliament and in the press that Britain would be better off without a deal, and let's implement Article 50. Let's get out of EU, and the deadline is 29th of March 2019. And after that, we will come up with some sort of a deal, because at the moment some people feel that EU is not happy with the UK for leaving EU, and that's why they are not giving a good deal to Britain, because they want to make an example out of UK to give to send a warning to other members who who might think in the future that they could leave EU. So these are the few things which are top on the list at the moment.
I want to get more into these points with you, Mr. KAZMI, but very quickly, just pulling in Dr. ZAKRIYA here. What is your take on how they sorted out the Gibraltar issue with Spain? Do you feel like it has hurt UK in the long run, or was this bound to happen?
In this issue, there is a great deal of confusion. But I think at this stage, there is a more chaotic and disrupting things are going on, because policymakers and general public is a bit confused. What would happen? What would happen to borders in custom economy and other institutions, especially national security, human rights, migration, all these issues would have deeper consequences of this, I should say, the divorce. So this would not be a very amicable divorce. There would be some unpredictable consequences of this thing.
There really is a lot of confusion, Mr. KAZMI. We have seen this happen earlier as well when the referendum took place in the UK. After the results came, there was a majority asking in favor of leaving the EU. But later on, as the situation developed and matured, the contention was that the people who were voting to leave the EU weren't the ones that really made a difference. Could you expand a little on that?
Yes, you know, when people voted for Brexit, it was a very close vote. There was a lead of 3 or 4%. And the town I live in, that town voted to leave EU. They voted on certain things because there were a lot of immigrants from EU who were living in that town, and it had put pressure on public services like medical services, schools, and all that. But many people were not sure what Brexit would mean. And I've got this feeling now, if we have another referendum and many of those people who voted to leave EU would vote to remain. And currently if we don't have a deal, if the UK Parliament doesn't pass, if they decide to reject the deal, a Brexit deal, there is a possibility that we might have another referendum in the future. At the moment, 40 plus Labour MPs and about 8 Tory MPs have publicly asked for another referendum. And if this confusion, as you said, carries on, and if there is a no deal, there might be, you know, in the future, we might see another referendum.
Now, Prime Minister Theresa May seems to have being proactive about this, is predicting that this might be the case. And so she's come out time and again and said that there will be no renegotiation, there will not be another referendum. How does this translate with the general public, with the MPs?
Again, it's a very divisive issue. As I said before, margin of the lead was very tiny in the referendum. There are strong feelings on both sides. Some people want to leave EU. Some people want to remain remain in the EU. So at the moment, what Theresa May is doing, she's got 2 weeks. They are launching a public campaign from today. So they'll be advertising in newspapers and in media. So basically, she's going directly to the people to appeal to them, to sell them this deal. And she's hoping that the constituents, the voters, would force their MPs and to approve this deal in the parliament.
This is a really interesting point that Mr. KAZMI has highlighted here. I want to ask you, Mr. ZAKRIYA, that how realistic is it that her attempt to go directly straight to the public, to convince them, to get them on board? And we have seen polls taking place that seem to suggest that a lot of the public is sort of sympathizing with Prime Minister Theresa May's position here. But honestly, how much of it will come across in how the MPs vote, and how much will be affected by the internal strife, if I may, within the members of parliament vying for the position of Theresa May?
It's difficult to comment on this, but I am amazed at how very well-informed and educated public of Britain is playing at the hands of propagandists, and there are conspiracy theories and non-scientific and unfounded things are going around, and theories, hypotheses, and public is buying that. I really can't understand that how this well-informed, well-educated, historically well-educated and scientific public have been subscribing this. And that is basically contributing to the confusion in public opinion and also in policymakers, and also the consequence of this saga. So I'm not very sure the consequences of this and the pattern of decision-making, of policy-making. It all depends how propaganda and misinformation is injected and public opinion is formulated for the days to come.
No, but if you were to, I'm curious to know what your idea of propaganda here is and what you feel is ideal for the public, for the UK, in terms of whether this deal should come through, how the MPs should vote. What is your take on this?
Look, Brexit is not, scientifically speaking, is not a good news for Britain public, because they are ultimately losers. Because like re-emergence of nationalism and re-emergence of closed borders and greedy nationalism is not a good news for the region, not good news for the whole world. And by this, fissures and nationalistic tendencies all over the world will emerge and will be encouraged. So I think the best course for the public is to see the facts. And facts are that they are ultimately dangerous for them. They are ultimately, it undermines their own society and welfare system. But due to public discourse and propaganda and conspiracy theories and many other things for the last so many years, it's happening in world states. And the negative outcomes and results and developments we are seeing.
That's a really interesting point, and I want to pose this to Mr. KAZMI here, that what Mr. ZAKRIYA is essentially saying, if they do exit, what it might also encourage is a sort of fear of foreigners, fear of immigrants, to put it in complete layman's terms, and sort of exacerbate the hostility that people had for refugees coming in after the Arab Spring, especially from Syria. And in that context, I want to ask you, how big is this an issue that it might just become worse if UK does exit?
Soon after the referendum, we've seen the increase in racist attacks. We've seen increase on attacks on people from ethnic minorities, attacks on religious establishments. So we have already seen an increase. So this is a very genuine fear. But there are strong arguments on both sides. As I said before, strong feelings on both sides. There are people who are not racist. They are not against any other minority or against any religion, but they genuinely feel that Brexit is the way forward. They think Britain would be better off without EU. So we cannot blame them. We cannot generalize this. We cannot say this. Everybody who voted to exit EU is a racist, who's against immigrants. They are very educated people who are highly intelligent, and they just want to leave Britain leave EU because they feel that leaving EU is good for their country. On the other hand, there are very well-informed, educated people who feel that EU is the way forward. We must remain EU because Britain cannot be a prosperous state without EU. And a recent research came out and it shows that by 2030, Britain would be 100 billion worse off every year if we leave EU. Again, then there are other research which says when we leave EU, we'll do the agreements, trade agreements with other countries, and we'll be better off, and we'll explore new markets. As Donald Trump said this as well, because he is all for Britain to leave EU and to renegotiate agreements, trade agreements with USA, South America, and Canada, and then the trade agreements with China and non-EU countries. So but
Mr. KAZMI, no, I understand that there are two sides of the argument here. That a lot of the population, the MPs, they are for leaving the EU because of economic reasons. But when you speak to the people in the streets and you see how the economy fares as compared to other EU members, the rest of the 27 members, don't you feel that maybe UK does do much better and contributes much more economically to the EU as compared to other members and might be getting bogged down by this relationship?
Yes, there is a feeling. I've traveled Europe extensively, to be honest. If you go to Eastern Europe, if you go to countries like Estonia, countries like Poland, they are very energetic. They are very enthusiastic about EU because they want to remain in EU. Again, there are countries which are highly developed, which are contributing a lot of money to EU, and their population, majority of their population is very pro-EU. Countries like Germany, countries like France. But if you travel Britain, if you travel across Britain, you do get the feeling that there's a sizable portion of population which feels that we are contributing too much, in terms of money, in terms of funds. But that is, this is where the propaganda comes in. Because if we look at Wales, Wales have, benefited immensely by EU funding. And when the vote came to leave EU, Wales voted to leave EU. So there is, as my colleague was mentioning before, there is certain propaganda and certain things which are going around, and people are not sure about stuff. And some people are making their mind, basically you can call them, they are ill-informed.
Mr. ZAKRIYA, Dr. ZAKRIYA, you mentioned how it would be a bad idea for Brexit to happen. Let me play the devil's advocate here and ask you, what are the drawbacks of if they remained, UK remained with the EU?
Yeah, I think this exit is not an isolated local phenomenon. It is connected with the processes of globalization. Look at the development for the last 20 years. At country level, nationalism is re-emerging. There are threats and fears. And politicians are milking the fear. Because of global forces, countries are being influenced both positively and negatively. And by the way, evidence is there. We can't say that people don't respect evidence, but problem is that evidence is available for every perspective. For instance, if some people in the streets of Britain think that EU has taken over our country, our sovereignty is gone, our economy, our exclusivity, our culture is damaged. Yes, indeed it is damaged. And there is that. But if people argue that it's a good for overall and long-term progress, it's good for the creation of a welfare regime, it's good for humanitarian regime, it's good for global peace and tranquility, yes, evidence is also there. So you see, it all depends on perspective. So there is no to support one perspective or the other perspective. But the issue is that these forces of globalization are disturbing and reassembling every region, every country is being reassembled. For instance, look at the politics of Trump and look at the politics of extremists in Pakistan and in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, everywhere. So look at this extremism, Brahmis in Pakistan. Earlier, Brahmis were very, very peaceful, but now things are different. So my argument is that this Brexit exit is linked with the global processes of change, and it is the responsibility of countries' politicians and countries' academia to educate the public. But unfortunately, instead of educating, they are also fanning the nationalism. They are also fanning the hate and extremism. And now, more and more extremism, I should say secular extremism. In many countries in the Western Europe, there is secular extremism. Extremist tendencies, exclusive tendencies are high. And
so, Mr. ZAKRIYA, basically what I understand you're saying here is that if UK does leave the EU, will basically harbor a lot of unrest and the fears that are already with the masses there in UK. Nationalism is going to re-emerge, racism is going to go up, and right now geopolitics demand that there be more and more cohesive relationships between countries in the region. And Mr. KAZMI, I want to ask you this. Is this a reason maybe why this process was such a difficult, complicated, long drawn out? I mean, it's been going on for 2 years now. There are still so many unanswered questions in the public's mind, not just within UK, but across Europe, across the world. of what exactly this entails, this deal alone. So do you think this might have been a deliberate effort to discourage the UK or even other EU members to go down this road?
Yes, that could be the reason. Another thing, this is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before. Article 50 of Lisbon Treaty allows any member state of EU to leave EU, but this has never happened before. So it's the first time. So we're all learning. Our leaders are learning, our states are learning. So it's a learning process for everyone. That's why there is such a confusion. Again, there is a feeling in EU, if we make this easy for Britain, this would encourage other states, because we have already seen movements in France, in Germany, in Holland. In France, we've seen Front National of Marie Le Pen of Front National. She's been campaigning to leave EU. And so there are other voices within the EU because they want hard borders. Because when you travel within the EU, there's hardly any border checks. You can start from France and all the way to Spain, and you'll cross the border and you would not even know that you have walked into another country. But with Britain, it was a different case. Even if you have a European visa, you are not allowed in Britain. So Britain has always maintained its what you call unique or some sort of unique standing within the EU. And most migrants who come to EU, then they reach France, and they most of them would like to come to Britain, but they are not allowed because there are border checks within EU. Although UK is a member of EU, but there are very strict border checks. So that's why Britain has always been a special case, what I would say, because they've got their own currency. All the other European countries have euro. They all have got one single currency, but Britain has still got its pound sterling. So Britain, there is this from colonial past and from old glory days, there is this feeling in Britain that we are better, and somehow we are better than the rest of the lot, and we should be able to survive without them.
Also, but I really want to ask you this now, is that do you feel that could be really a key reason, or could there also be the kind of terrorism we are seeing expand within UK's borders? Maybe they are struggling to get that in control, and do you feel like that could be also a major contributor in them trying to seclude themselves from this arrangement? And also on the same note, either it's this or is it more of an economic reason? They feel they can get a better deal in trading independently, individually, breaking away from the rules that EU imposes on its members?
Both. Some people who voted to leave EU voted because they were there was certain xenophobia. They thought, if we stay in the Europe, just like Germany, we'll get hundreds and thousands of migrants from other countries. And some people who thought if we leave EU, and they still believe in this, if we leave EU, we'll be economically better off. So it's a mixture of both. What is the real cause, or which one is right or which one is wrong, only time would tell, to be honest. At the moment, as I said before, it is unprecedented. We have not witnessed anything like this before, and everyone is confused, journalists, politicians, and the general public. And a lot of people I speak to in the street, they are regretting to vote leave.
It is a very confusing and complicated topic, and it's interesting to note that besides those abroad, across borders and very far from the UK are also confused. Not only they, but people within the UK also are not quite clear of what's happening. And I just want to end this segment with you, Dr. ZAKRIYA, about this leaving comment on whether or not this is majorly an economic situation that is pushing the UK to take this decision in trying to exit the EU, or at the end of the day, there's more to this story?
I think my honorable analyst was telling that everybody is learning a lesson. That's my comment, that the world community is learning a lesson in a very hard way, and it has a huge cost. So I think global system must learn lessons very prudently and not in a very hard way. And this divisive and nationalist tendency must be controlled. Global community must manage social change. Technology-driven social change must be managed properly. Otherwise, I think it would add further chaos, confusion, unrest, which ultimately lead to undermine the humanitarian cause for which I think European Union was established to ensure more integration, more welfare, which I think by this divisive tendencies have undermined. So both community need to learn lessons in a right way and in a good way rather than in a hurt and damaging.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. ZAKRIYA, there giving us your input on what would exactly happen and what is happening within the UK as it seeks to exit the EU. And also, I'd like to thank our other guest, Dr. ATHER KAZMI, for your take on the events. We're going to take a quick short break here. Stay with Newswire. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Newswire. Now, let's go to Afghanistan. This has been a very bloody week for the country. Saturday saw the assassination of the head of Kabul Ulama Council by unknown armed men. Sunday also saw up to 20 policemen were ambushed by the Taliban in a convoy in Farah province. And so much more has been going on. But before I get into the events as they unfold in the past week, I want to welcome my guests here. We have Mr. Mushtaq Rahim. There's an independent political and security analyst from Kabul, and a journalist based out of Kabul, Mr. Mohammad Natiki. Thank you so much for joining us here on Newswire. But let me first ask you, Mr. Rahim, to comment a little about how suddenly this seems in the past month alone, as peace talks are making some form of progress, the violence in Afghanistan seems to also be escalating.
Look, this is commonly attached to any of the peace processes where you always have spoilers trying to spoil any peace process. And we have experienced this across the globe wherever there have been conflicts and followed by the peace processes. So in Afghanistan, indeed, there have been outfits, there have been players who are trying to disrupt the whole peace process, and for that reason, they have been trying to enhance the level of violence across the country, especially in areas where they can infiltrate easily, so that they can disrupt the peace process. The good thing is that the peace process is moving forward, and there have been significant headways. But in the meantime, of course, this has been expected by those who know the peace processes and the people who have experience of such kind of process. That's why I believe this will continue to rise as the peace process continue to progress, and we see some positive progress taking place. And as such, you will see some outfits trying to disrupt the whole process.
Mr. Natiki, let me ask you this also. What is your take on how this is unfolding in Afghanistan? There are international players coming forth, the Taliban coming forward, peace talks taking place, meeting in Qatar, meeting in Moscow. And then at the same time, we're seeing these, as Mr. Rahim has mentioned just earlier, that this seems to happen a lot every time peace is the topic of the region, that we see a lot of escalation in violence. What is your take on it? Is this unprecedented, what we have seen in the last month alone, considering where we were headed with peace talks?
Hello, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, the escalating war in Afghanistan is very, very dangerous. Unfortunately, Taliban forces and the other groups believe to continue their war against the Afghan government, against the people of Afghanistan. They believe, and finally, they are victor to the Afghan government. But I think this is wrong idea, this is wrong belief, because by war, nobody can succeed in Afghanistan. The main issue for our people, for for our country, for our neighboring country, for international society, peace and stability in Afghanistan. But the main problem, I think, the position of the Taliban. Taliban not accept the peace negotiation. Taliban continued their fighting against against the people of Afghanistan. Also, another group also in Afghanistan fighting. For example, yesterday we have the assassination of the head of the ulama, because he strongly condemned the conflict and war in Afghanistan. He strongly condemned the terrorist activity in Afghanistan. And finally, he assassinated by the groups. Also in Farah, also in the other area, we have a lot of problem regarding the conflict. Conflict continued. The reason that is the Taliban and the other groups don't believe to the peace. They want to win the war and defeat the Afghan government.
Let me ask you, Mr. Rahim, what after what Mr. Natiki is saying, but when you say that, you seem to be implying earlier that there is always a third actor. They're trying to get in the middle of establishing peace in the region. But this incident that took place in Farah province, where the Taliban ambushed a convoy of police officers, 20 were killed. I mean, doesn't this seem like they're really not contributing as honestly as they should be to a peace process?
You have some parts of Afghanistan where some groups are operating independently. I don't say that they don't link up with the Taliban, but even among the Taliban, as can be the case anywhere, you will have some individuals or some influential personalities not believing in the peace process, rather thinking toppling down the current regime. And so there can be some individuals, but in general terms, as we have been coming to know as part of the Moscow conference or the meetings that have happened in Qatar, Doha, there the Taliban have shown great have inclined. They have been looking forward to talk to the international community, particularly to the Americans. So there can be seen a lot of appetite among the Taliban, expecting to end this ongoing conflict through a political settlement. But certainly there are two kinds of spoilers. One of the regional countries, for example, Iranians, they don't want a very stable Afghanistan, because a stable Afghanistan is against their national interest. And in Farah province, they have been trying to infiltrate and try to create a sort of instability to really disrupt the whole peace process. So all in all, if we want a conclusion, there is a process among all the actors, including the Afghan government, the international community, and the Taliban. But then there are smaller groups, there are regional powers who really want to disrupt the Afghan peace process in order to pursue their personal agenda.
Mr. Natiki, what is your take on the third actor, the miscreants who don't want peace to happen in the region? And especially when we talk about maybe those groups, those unofficial, under-the-radar groups who are basically supporting indirectly, have been supporting indirectly the Western-backed government's attempt to fight the Taliban in mustering as much dominance as they can in the region. Do you feel like maybe some of those elements are now also getting a little out of control, trying to go rogue and trying to disrupt the peace in the region?
Okay. At this moment, we have three problems. Number one is Taliban, because Taliban not accept the peace and negotiation. They don't want to talk with Afghan government. They want to talk with America. They believe can to succeed by the war and win the war and defeat of Afghan government. This is the main problem. The other problem, the second problem is the regional government and support of the Taliban. You know, a lot of in the regional countries supporting the Taliban, they encourage the Taliban. This is the other problem. The third problem, I think, we have in peace in Afghanistan because the conflict between the regional government, for example, Pakistan and India have a lot of problem. Iran and Saudi have a lot of problem. Also, Russia and America have a lot of problem. If Russia holds the meeting of the peace, America not participate to the meeting. This is another problem. The differences between the countries. Also, the big problem for the peace in Afghanistan. For this reason, unfortunately, we are with time. The conflict is continue. This is the big problem, that these three problems, Taliban and regional country and different between the countries. Yes, of course, I should mention about our government. Afghanistan government also have a problem, but the Afghan government, you know, without any condition, ready to enter to negotiation with the Taliban without any condition, precondition.
Mr. Mushtaq Rahim, let me ask you this. What I was trying to ask Mr. Natiki was that there seems to be some rogue elements within the Afghanistan's border coming from inside. Now, and I want to refer here to an incident that took place here on Sunday. Skirmishes between the police and protesters took place in various parts in Kabul, in Bamiyan province, and this was over a commander, Alipur, who was arrested by the Afghanistan police. Now, first of all, could you talk a little about who this person is and who are the supporters who are protesting on the street for him?
Well, I don't think that that's an issue to be so much exaggerated. He was a local commander, and he has been attached to some of the former Mujahideen groups and have been operating in one of the geographical areas where he resides. And then there were complaints against him to the Afghan government, and as such, the Afghan forces captured him based on directive from the National Prosecutor's Office. It's a legal process, and then he also has some supporters who are supporting him. Unfortunately, sometimes media pick up on issues and so exaggerated. People protested, and some of the people reverted to violence against police, and which was retaliated by police using the tear shells, etc. And they are just protesting.
So let's clarify the misconceptions in the international media here about Alipur. First of all, when we say that he was a local commander and his association, if the New York Times published a report where they called him an anti-Taliban local commander who was basically, while fighting the Taliban, helping the Western-backed government, suddenly turned rogue. Can you clarify whether this is an accurate depiction of who he was?
Listen, any country that tries to rise from the conflict and try to transform into post-conflict situation, having gone through a long-standing civil war, will have some characters armed, having an attachment to the previous warlords, or playing the role of a warlord. And of course, Alipur was someone who was against the Taliban for sure, but not and using his local military presence to not only fight the Taliban under the pretext of defending his people, his communities, but also was using his force illegally, illegitimately, and people had complained against him. It's not only Alipur. In Afghanistan, different parts, since we have been going through a conflict for 4 decades, you will find so many warlords. And the current Afghan government has taken initiative of ousting these warlords by taking them to the courts or disarming them, to making them turn to civilian life. And there have been a lot of operations against such outfits, such individuals in different parts of the country, in all parts of the country almost. And as such, this has been an effort to really eliminate those outfits. Well, we can differentiate between the Taliban and the warlords. Previous hegemony, military hegemony in the geographies that they are located, they try to influence the local politics, try to really establish parallel structures to the government, and government taken an initiative to eliminate those outfits who under the flag of the Afghan government operate, but then challenge the government threat. Of course, the government is fighting the Taliban, and there is a large number of military and police forces defying the Taliban's encroachment. So that's a process. Sometimes these kind of things are over-exaggerated. Just like a few months back, a person in northern Afghanistan called Qaisari, he was was detained by the Afghan government and was handed over to the judicial system to really follow up on his cases that people had lodged against him.
So, Mr. Nataqi, let me ask you this, what Mr. Rahim has been saying, the government is taking action actively to sort of rein in the powers or the dominance they have in the region of the warlords. How effective do you think they are in their strategy to pull them back?
Okay, about the warlord, as my colleague mentioned, this is abuse from this word. Government unfortunately want to defeat some famous commander in the different area like Alipur, like Qaisari, like other. Government fear from them. In the first time, government support them and give them the weapons and money and mobilize them against the Taliban. Alipur in the Hazara in the Hazara area, particularly in the Maidan province, has too much progress against the Taliban. As in New York Times mentioned, the famous commander anti the Taliban. But the government fear from them and arrest him, but accuse him by different words and accuse him he is warlord. I think this is wrong, but unfortunately our government not thinking about this issue. Alipur is famous commander in the Hazarajat, and all of the people in this area like him and follow him. Not accept to arrest him. For this reason, we now protest in Kabul, in the Bamiyan, in the Daikundi, in the Mazar. In the other province, a lot of demonstration and rally against the government, and they want to release the Alipur from the prison. No any complaint from Alipur, because I'm from this region, I understand. No any complaint against Alipur. All of the people support him. But the government should be release him. This is wrong action. This is wrong. Has been our government committed this.
Okay, so Mr. Rahim, now as these different scenarios unfold in Afghanistan on a daily basis, we're hearing that the presidential elections are possibly going to see a delay. The election officials in Afghanistan are coming out. Indirectly, we're hearing reports that they're considering delaying this next year's presidential election. Do you feel like these kind of incidents have any role to play in the Election Commission's decision if it comes out and when it comes out on there being a delay in the presidential elections next year?
Incidents, the one that the protests are going on in support of this local commander?
That and other skirmishes that are taking place by unknown sources that are attacking security forces of the Afghanistan army, of the police?
Of course not. This is not the reason. Had that been the reason, the insecurity or protest of people, we would not have seen a successful parliamentary election taking place a couple of months back, or 1 month back actually. So that's not the reason. The rumors are that there is the potential for a breakthrough between the Taliban, the Afghan government, and international community, the Americans particularly, vis-a-vis process. And some that there is a real possibility of reaching a peace agreement with the Taliban. There is no harm in delaying the elections, presidential elections, so that after the signing of peace agreement, the Taliban can also have an opportunity to participate in the political process and have their political engagement. However, this has been mainly a media sort of rumor. The Afghan government has been quite clear. Even yesterday, I was seeing a clip from the presidential palace where they are quite clear that the Afghan government is prepared and ready to conduct the elections.
Okay, so Mr. Nataqi, let me ask you this: that you feel that maybe when Ashraf Ghani says that he is not in favor of this change in date of the elections, that could in any way stall the peace process? Could it in any way affect how the presidential elections take place and when they do?
Yes, indeed. As I mentioned, yesterday, political parties gathered in Kabul, they have a lot of discussion about the delay of the presidential election. Political party not accept this issue. You know, the president also insists should be presidential election should be held at the same time. But just now we heard IEC announced the presidential election should be delayed about 3 months. But yesterday, political parties discussed about this issue. They not accept the delay of the election, the suspension of the election. But if yes, of course, political party want two things from the election. Number one, the change of the system from SNTV to the MDR. This issue linked to the parliamentarian election that finished. This issue also linked to the provincial election and district election. We want the change of the system. Current system is SNTV. In this system, a lot of vote of the people vested. We want the change of the system from SNTV to MDR. The other issue we want completely biometric in the election. We want should be used from technology in the election because we have a lot of corruption in the election. The reason that is we haven't technology, haven't used from technology. For these two reasons, technology and change of the system. If government accepted that two subjects, no problem. Election should be delayed.
Okay, so Mr. Rahim, what's your take on this? How will this, before, as we head towards the presidential election, the more key issue here at hand is how peace talks will unfold. How are they progressing, especially considering that the Taliban refused to speak to the Western-backed government here in Afghanistan. They don't want to have anything to do with them. They want to talk directly to the US. Now, how is this going to go forward?
First of all, any peace talks, well, let me, with due respect to my friend speaking to you from Kabul, the Taliban have not asked for the interim government. They say that they haven't talked about, they haven't been at that advanced level to discuss about government or elections. What I said was an analysis that probably the international community and some of the outfits here in Afghanistan believe that elections should be delayed so that they allow the Taliban to participate. The interim government and everything will come as part of discussion when they reach that level. There is always two levels of negotiations when you reach or you undertake peace negotiation. One is pre-negotiation and one is the actual negotiation. Right now, what is happening is pre-negotiation. And during the pre-negotiation, you have all parties playing, keeping their cards close to their heart, trying to influence and take a stronger position before going on to the formal negotiation table. The Taliban are doing the same. They are putting some conditions and demands, such as not prepared to talk to the Afghan government, full withdrawal of the international forces, and things like that. They will continue to do that so that when they go to the negotiation table, they have a bargaining chip. That's putting these serious conditions. As far as the negotiation is concerned, the Americans have been quite clear, the Afghan government has been quite clear, and even some members of the Taliban here in Kabul residing, they are quite clear that it has to be peace trilaterally. If the Afghans were going to live together here in Afghanistan, so it has to be trilateral, sorted out the Americans, but of course a deal has to be reached. The political parties, the civil society, and general public of the Afghanistan, on the negotiation table. So yes, they are putting these demands, but as things will unfold, as things will progress, my analysis is that things will tone down. There will be compromises made, and there will be flexibility shown. So things are moving in the right directions. And as far as I think Afghan peace process is taking positive headways, and hopefully this will continue. Final setup.
So, Mr. Natiki, what Mr. Rahim is saying here, one of the conditions that the Taliban has put forth in trying to achieve peace here, using it as a bargaining chip later in the post-negotiation rounds, is that basically complete withdrawal of foreign forces. Now, we're talking about US forces, we're talking about NATO forces, but realistically and historically, and this is a question that comes from our social media viewers, is that how willing really is the US in leaving Afghanistan without supporting any armed groups behind?
Yes, of course. Regarding the peace negotiation with the Taliban, we should mention about two important issues. Number one, the demand of the Taliban will be talking with Mr. Khalilzad. Three issues they mentioned to this number one. Three subjects Taliban mentioned to the Khalilzad. Number one is the withdrawal of the American troops from Afghanistan. The second issue, blacklist should be removed. And third issue, the prison of the Taliban. Yes, of course, this is demand of the Taliban. But the other issue that is very, very important about the government, about the structure of the government, my colleague told me, no, Taliban not accept the interim government. No, I believe Taliban not accept the election. Taliban, if we succeed to have good negotiation with the Taliban and finally we operate to the positive, if we succeed to the negotiation, Taliban want the interim government. Taliban not want the, yes, of course, and if we succeed to form interim government, in the interim government, yes, Taliban want to talk about the election, about the constitution, about the other issue. But before that, Taliban not accept the election, not accept the president election. Also, you know, Taliban reject the parliamentarian election and treat the people not participate to the parliamentarian election. Taliban.
Right. But it seems,
Taliban
well, Mr. Natiki, it's
interim government.
Right. So, no, well, what my question really was that, and I want to ask Mr. Rahim this, and this is essentially that one of the conditions is that the foreign forces troops withdraw completely. And this is one of the conditions of the Taliban. Now, my question that I asked Mr. Natiki is, and I want to hear your opinion on it, Mr. Rahim, is that how realistic is this, and historically, given the relationship, in order to achieve this trilateral peace, that the US and the foreign forces will leave without supporting any other armed group in the region? Now, your comments, please, on this.
Listen, the Americans have not been supporting any groups, but they have been supporting the Afghan government since 2001. Bonn Conference was the process of state building where all the parties, the Americans and the international community facilitated the establishment of new democratic government in Afghanistan, and they contributed to the state building process in the country. So basically, they have been investing in the Afghan state as they have been doing by supporting countries in the region such as Pakistan. They have been engaged with India right now, and they have been supporting Koreans in the far side of Asia. So they have been contributing to many countries similar to the ones in the region, and they will be supporting the Afghan government. There is a commitment on the side of the Afghan government and the Americans. As far as the withdrawal is concerned, of course, when you don't need the international forces, when there is stability and peace in Afghanistan, when there is no regional countries interfering or they are not able to interfere in the Afghan affairs, for sure, the Americans will not be required and they will withdraw. As we saw between the 2010 and 2014, the Americans withdrew from 100,000 forces, they came down to 8,000. And definitely when Afghan insurgency is over, when there is stability in Afghanistan, even Afghans don't require them. Right now, They are here only to support the Afghan forces. Since 2014, they have rarely been participating in combat missions. Rather, they have mainly been engaged in supporting the Afghan forces. Similarly, as they have been supporting many other countries over the course of their relations and the history of the relations. Just like you have military cooperation agreements with different countries, one that the countries in the region have, like Pakistan, Iran, we will have that cooperation agreement with them. And based on that, the bilateral relationship
okay.
Pursued and followed.
Right, now, Mr. Nategi, since we're running out of time here, very quickly, I wanted to ask you one last question is, how is it going to be different, you feel, the U.S. withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan and NATO forces? How is it going to be different from how it happened in the past? Is this going to be a less rushed, a more cohesive decision taken with all actors on board? Or do you feel similarities in what happened earlier? Very quickly, sir, we're just running out of time. Okay, I think we've lost him. We've got some technical fault here. But let me ask you this, Mr. Rahim, as we come to a close to the program, the same question. What are your closing remarks on this? History repeating itself, or maybe this will be different?
No, this is based on a timeline where a timeline will be agreed among all the parties, including those who join the peace process, and they will go out based on a timetable. And then the Afghan government and the Americans, and not only Americans, but whole of the international community, will remain bilaterally cooperating with each other on military side, economic side, and different other sides. The state building process will continue, the state building evolution process will continue. So all in all, I think it will be a very cohesive process. The Afghans have learned their lessons, and the international community has also learned post-1988-89 USSR withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mushtaq Rahim. I want to thank both my guests, Mr. Mushtaq Rahim and also Mr. Mohammed Nategi. We seem to have lost him on the line. Both speaking to us from Kabul. You've been watching Newswire with me, Ayza Omar. Stay tuned for our new program tomorrow.